Coming up on New England Hockey Journal, it's our annual look at the top New England prospects eligible for this summer's NHL entry draft. We'll get insight from New England Hockey Journal's Jeff Cox as we count down the top 10 local players, hoping to hear their name called come draft day. Hello again and welcome to New England Hockey Journal. I'm Evan Marinofsky. The NHL's entry draft is fast approaching, set for June 28th and 29th in Nashville. 7 rounds, 217 players, all hoping for their chance to one day play professional hockey. There are several names we certainly will be hearing about up to and after draft day. Any and all experts expect the overall top pick will be Connor Bedard, a 5'9" center who plays in the Western Hockey League.
Top corner, Connor Bedard!
Projected at number 2 is Adam Fantilli, an 18-year-old 6'2" center playing this year for Michigan, where he leads the NCAA in scoring. Most say that the third pick in the draft will be Leo Carlsson, who plays in the Swedish Elite League. NHL Central Scouting calls Carlsson this year's top European skater. That's a quick snapshot of the top of the overall draft picture. Now, there are players from our area who hope to hear their name called come draft time, and for that, we bring in our top draft choice, Jeff Cox, from the New England Hockey Journal. Jeff, welcome.
Evan, thanks for having me.
So we're going to get into a lot of kids from New England in this show, but there's one at the very, very top, number 2 overall, most likely, Adam Fantilli, not from New England, but has a pretty big local tie.
Yeah, he spent the 2020-21 season at Kimball Union, and before he moved on to the USHL Chicago Steel. And even way back then at Kimball Union playing for Coach Whitehead, he proved that he was a big-time player, eventually earned his commitment to the University of Michigan, and he's a player that just stood out even all those years back as a youngster playing prep hockey.
And a lot of kids from New England in the past have gone very high in the draft. Jack Eichel in 2015, Matty Beniers in 2021. This year, Will Smith looks to be the guy inside the top 10 who will make a pretty big impact.
Yeah, I'm not sure Will will go in the top 2 like Eichel went and Beniers went, but he's a big-time player who certainly looks to be a top 5 or top 10 NHL draft pick this year. Should
be interesting, and every year we come up with a list of the top 10 local prospects in the draft. Jeff, let's begin at number 10, work our way up. Lucas St. Louis plays in the USHL for the Dubuque Fighting Saints from Greenwich, Connecticut. What have you thought of his game this year?
I really like St. Louis and thought he has stepped into the USHL and done well, and to me, he's a mid-Fairfield and Brunswick alum who has always shown the ability to skate well and have mobility and move pucks up the ice and contribute offensively. He's done that in the USHL, maybe not at the rate production-wise that he would have done if he had stayed at Brunswick, but I really like the fact that he challenged himself and took that step in his career development-wise, and I think he'll be better off for it in the end.
Jeff, a lot of these kids we'll talk about today kind of made that decision. Do I stay in prep? Do I go to the USHL? When a player makes that decision, how important is that in factoring where they're going to go in the draft, if they decide to go to the USHL or stay in prep?
I think you talk to a lot of NHL scouts around here and in Minnesota where there's 2 places that have those options of staying in prep or staying in high school, and a lot of them feel that it's the best for the kids to go to the USHL and prove themselves at a little bit of a higher level, and just shows that commitment level to actually wanting to prioritize hockey. And it's something that a lot of kids struggle with, because it is a great thing to be able to graduate from the prep school or high school that you started with, play with your friends, and have that community feel that you can kind of fall back on for the rest of your life.
And moving on, we go to number 9, Andon Zerbone, a native of Stamford, Connecticut, 5'9" forward playing this year for the Youngstown Phantoms of the USHL. Jeff, how has he been progressing this year, and how did he make the list?
So he's a kid that made that jump from prep school to the USHL a couple years ago. He's now in his 3rd year in the USHL, and he's a skilled forward, really good on the power play. He can come off the half wall on the power play, has a lot of skill. Offensive creativity. He's a kid that needs to round out his game, his overall game, his game away from the puck. But I think he'll do that at Quinnipiac. He's committed to Quinnipiac for next fall, and I think Rand Pecknold has done a great job at Quinnipiac at kind of helping everyone be held accountable and fine-tune their details in their game.
For a kid like Serbone, how important, I know you mentioned rounding out his game, what else can he kind of work on to potentially get himself in good position for the NHL draft?
Just has to get stronger and has to prove that he's dialed in away from the puck and is committed to playing a team game away from the puck and in the defensive zone and just kind of maturing his game. But NHL teams look for projection, and to me, obviously his size is a factor when you project him out, but the offensive skill and the ability to score at over a point per game in the USHL is a very rare feat, and he's done that.
We're just getting started as we work our way to number 1. New England Hockey Journal continues in a moment.
New England Hockey Journal's Rinkwise podcast, hosted by Stephanie Wood, is the hockey podcast for serious hockey players and their supporters to help guide them throughout their hockey careers with interviews and insight from some of the biggest names in the game. Download Rinkwise today wherever you get your podcasts or listen at hockeyjournal.com/podcast.
We are back with our look at the top 10 New England prospects, hoping to hear their names called come NHL draft time in late June. Moving along, Jeff, number 8 on our list, Joe Connor, just won a big NEPSAC Elite 8 title in early March with Avon Old Farms.
Yeah, Joe's a great story. His development has really taken off over the last 12 months. Always a good player, New Hampshire kid, played for Hillside School, played Minuteman Flames, but his stock has risen quite a bit since last June when he had a big USA Select 17 camp out in Buffalo, earned an invite to the Holinka Gretzky Cup. He's just one of those players that competes really hard. His skating is good for this level, probably a little bit of an issue as far as NHL upside, but smaller kid, but also someone that wins a lot of battles, goes into the dirty areas, makes players around him better.
He was on one of the best lines, if not the best line, in prep hockey this year. How do you think that could potentially impact his draft stock and his development as a player this year?
I just feel like the way he made players around him better will help his stock, because that's a question you're always asking when you're watching games. Does a certain player make others around him better? And to me, Joe Connor made both of his line mates better. He was committed heading into the year. His 2 line mates both received commitments, as the year went along, which just to me proves, Charlie Golov's a great player in his own right, but it just proves that Joe made players around him better.
It's a good thing to make the people around you better. And moving right along to number 7, Will McDonough, played last 2 seasons in the USHL with the Sioux Falls Stampede. Jeff, how has he developed along this year?
So Will's an interesting one as well, just because if he had stayed in prep school or gone to prep school, his skating wouldn't have been as exposed as it has been in the USHL, and he would probably be putting up big numbers. He's a big kid, 6'2", comes off the wall really well, can be the net front on the power play or the half wall coming off of that. He's one of those players that just gets a lot of rebound goals, plays dirty. I like Will McDonough a lot. His skating is an issue, obviously, but he's a good player. We'll go to Harvard and see how he does from there.
Again, a good frame on him, and moving right along to someone who also has a good frame, number 6 on our list, another who played local prep school hockey this year, defenseman Sean Cohane from Milton, Mass, played this year at Dexter Southfield. I mentioned the frame element. How did you see him develop this season, and why is he number 6 on our list?
I think he's the type of player that has a lot of positives and has some drawbacks that NHL teams will view both. Big kid, 6'4", skates really well. Obviously, those are 2 attributes that are very important to NHL teams. You watch him. The more you watch him, the more you can nitpick him. For example, he rims a lot of pucks. He doesn't always make the best passes on breakouts, but at the end of the day, size and skating like that will get him drafted in June.
We mentioned projections earlier in this show, and that's what every NHL scout is trying to do, project where they're going to be in 3-4 years. He feels like someone that could project high in the sense of being a potential pro player someday.
Right. I mean, they're totally different players, but last year Michael Fisher, 6'4", skates well, went in the 3rd round to San Jose. Michael's a right shot, Sean's a left shot, but they're both good players in their own right. And I think the size and the skating is something that will help his draft stock.
5 down, 5 to go. Who's atop our list? Stay with us as New England Hockey Journal returns after this. Back with Jeff Cox of the New England Hockey Journal. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Jeff, 5 more players are on our list of the top 10 local prospects hoping to be chosen in this year's NHL Draft. Number 5, Ethan Gardula, played prep school locally this year, Cushing Academy, also now in the USHL in Sioux City. How did he develop this year?
I thought Ethan had a great year. He was on the first line with Landon Resendez, like we mentioned earlier, on one of the best lines in prep hockey. And Gardula isn't necessarily the guy that stands out as much as a Resendez, who I also really like, more of a flashy, skate, fly around the ice. But Gardula's a 200-foot wing. He played his offside a lot this year, which I had never seen him do in any of his previous years with the Junior Eagles or at Cushing last year. But he's one of those players that is good in his defensive zone, solid away from the puck, and to me, his biggest issue is he needs to assert himself more and kind of take over games like I think he's capable of with his size and his skating. If he learns to kind of be a driver on a line, I think the projection, like we talk about all the time, could be high for a player like Gardula.
How can a kid like Ethan Gardula gain that assertiveness in the USHL playing with older players? What's it going to take for that to kind of kick in?
Well, I think sometimes when you make that jump from prep to the USHL, you realize that it's not easy anymore, and that you have to demand the puck. You have to hunt pucks and get them back without you kind of relying on the pucks coming to you. And I really think that Gardula has the chance to really shine and play in the NHL someday, but he just has to be that kind of alpha dominant type player.
Gardula is going to be a really interesting one to watch in this draft. And speaking of someone else who's going to be very interesting in this draft, at number 4, Matt Capone, Mansfield, Massachusetts native, who this year played in Hockey East for the Merrimack Warriors.
Block, Merrimack will play it. Back up on top for Hillier. Hillier will fire one down low. In front, Capone scores! Matt Capone set up right in front of the goal.
So Matt Capone, very successful year this year at Merrimack. What was it about his game that helped him develop to get this high on the list?
So he almost scored a point per game at Merrimack in Hockey East and was on the first line all year long. Merrimack had a great year, finished second in Hockey East, lost in overtime in the Hockey East Championship, made the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2011, and Capone and Alex Jeffries, another local product who's an NHL draft pick of the New York Islanders, were big reasons for that success. And to me, Capone's number one attribute is his compete level. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He's one of those players that just wants to win, wants to make others around him better. He demands the puck. He plays in the middle of the ice. He scored a big overtime goal against UMass Lowell at the TD Garden in the Hockey East semifinals.
Merrimack down low, in front, score! Capone ends the night!
I've always liked Capone dating back to when he played at Mansfield High, played for Dexter Southfield after that, and he has some issues away from the puck. He has to get better in the neutral zone defensively, but he's a player that's going to be drafted based on the success he had against older players.
A guy like Capone building up his draft stock as much as he has this year at a school like Merrimack, who also built up their own stock a lot this year, how much could a guy like Matt Capone succeeding as much as he has impact recruiting down the road?
Yeah, I think for sure. The one thing I noticed about Merrimack this year is every game it seemed like those kids on that team would run through a brick wall for head coach Scott Borick and his staff, and Capone was kind of the leader in that regard. And it just goes to show you don't need to be at a Beanpot school or a top school to get noticed, and that's a good thing for college hockey and for Merrimack.
The countdown continues. The final 3 on our list after this on New England Hockey Journal.
Folk took it off his man out in front, and Guzzo jamming scores. Looks like Guys have done a great job, and all three guys are having great seasons. And all three of these players too, they're guys that want to learn, they want to get better every day, they come ready to work, and so they're a lot of fun to be around.
U.S. National Team Development Program head coach Dan Muse with high praise for the final three players on our list of local prospects for June's NHL Draft. All three are coached by Muse. All three are Boston College commits. Back with Jeff Cox. Number 3 on our New England prospects list is Will Vogt.
He can help you in terms of coming up with a big goal or a big play, or he's going to help you coming up with a big shot block or a big defensive play. And that's what he does. And on any given night, you don't know exactly what it's going to be, but you're going to expect, and we expect, because we've seen it so much, consistency, and that he's going to find a way to impact the game.
So Jeff, Muse with high praise for Will Vogt. What have you thought of his game this season?
I'm someone that has always really liked Will Vogt 4 or 5 years now. I probably have him higher than a lot of people. I think his hockey sense and his compete level are things that need to be valued more by NHL scouts and central scouting. Is he the biggest player in the draft class? No. Is he the most skilled? No. But he just makes players around him better, and I've always kind of been stuck with the comment that a coach made to me a couple years ago. Everyone on the team wants to play with Will Vogt, and he can play right wing, he can play center. Obviously his size is a negative in terms of NHL upside, but he's a player that I think deserves a shot. He's going to go to Boston College. I think he'll be a great 3-4 year player there. Just play in all situations, great character person, and to me, Vogt's an underrated player in this draft class.
We talk a lot about projections. A kid like Will Vogt, though, how do you project him at BC and how he kind of develops there?
See, I have no doubt that Will Vogt's going to be a great college player. I think he's going to be a player that'll probably stay longer than Leonard and Smith, be a big-time impact player as a junior and maybe as a senior. But he's going to be a great player at BC, and he's a player that's going to be really fun to watch, and Eagles fans are going to really like to have Will Vogt in a BC jersey.
They will, and you know who else they're going to like? The person number 2 on our list. We look again to the U.S. National Development Team program. Ryan Leonard, native of Amherst, Massachusetts. Coach Muse says the first thing he talks when talking about Leonard is a lot of power.
Yeah, Leonard's an explosive player with his skating, his shot. He's a pure goal scorer. He spurned UMass. His older brother, John Leonard, with the San Jose Sharks organization, now played for UMass. His dad was an assistant basketball coach there back in the day. With Ryan, he's another player like Capone who plays with a chip on his shoulder. Sometimes lets his emotions get the best of him. You always hear coaches say they'd rather reel a player in than have to kind of ignite a fire that isn't there. So I'm a big fan of Ryan Leonard's game, and I think it will translate. You don't get the right wing that can have that power and goal scoring ability every day.
And Leonard feels like someone who's going to be somewhere in the middle of the first round, correct?
Yeah, I think there might be a team that will step up, but I think the safe bet with Leonard is 10 to 20.
Finally, our top New England prospect in this year's NHL Draft, again from the same USNTDP team, and Coach Dan Muse loves what he has with Lexington, Mass native Will Smith.
Will's a guy who's he works on both sides of the puck. He's a guy that, you can trust in any situation. He's having a really strong year. He's a lot of fun to work with, but, that hockey sense and that skill, you combine that, makes for a pretty dangerous player.
So, Jeff, what do you think of Will Smith and how he's developed this season?
Will Smith just keeps taking strides in the right direction. He's a player that's always been the best player on the ice when you've watched him with the Junior Eagles coming up ever since he was 13, 14 years old. But what really strikes me is his compete and his ability to play in all situations and be just more dialed in all the time. You could, back 3-4 years ago, you could critique his consistency and his engagement all the time, but he's really just taking great strides and become that power forward who can make plays, make others better, and he's a dynamic center, can probably play wing as well, but he's a big-time player, and he's possibly going to go 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th overall.
So Jeff, you touched on it a little bit there at the end. Everyone's kind of wondering, could Will Smith potentially sneak into the top 5? What do you think it's going to take for him to get into that top 5, or as you said, go 6, 7, or 8?
Well, coming up here in April is the U18 World Championships, and if Smith or Leonard or any bunch of players have a big showing that can really impact their draft stock positively, I think a lot of scouts, and rightfully so, have a recency bias, and there won't be another showing after the U18 Worlds. So if he can have a big U18 Worlds, he could maybe elevate his stock further.
So Jeff, this draft class, how does this compare to past New England draft classes going to the NHL Draft?
I think the depth of it certainly doesn't match past drafts. Will Smith and Ryan Leonard are sure things. They're first-round picks, but after that, I think every other player we talked about today, there will be a scout or two in the NHL that would like to draft that player, but there are also going to be a number of people that don't feel as positively about those players. I've talked to a few people that have said there might not be anyone else taken outside of Smith and Leonard, and I think that won't happen. I think Vode and Cohen and Gardula and Caponi will all be drafted. There's certainly a chance that it's in the single digits, where the last few years, last year I think there were 10 New England players taken.
Good luck to all the players from New England hoping to hear their names come NHL draft time in late June. I'm Evan Marinofsky. See you next time on New England Hockey Journal.